You mentioned when Trump was in Riyadh, the Chinese also opened a gold vault,
Yes.
and really around the notion of a post-dollar system.
Yeah.
Maybe talk a little about that.
Yeah, there's two things there. One is just to back up a minute, because again, we're fed, our worldview is shaped by our media and our reporting. But what you often forget is that the Gulf countries in particular, but among a set of countries in general, we have a slide on this that we might get to later on, the one with the Venn diagram. Maybe just if you can find that. But as a background to this, I'll just say that, oh yeah, perfect. Thank you for that. The Gulf countries are always practicing what I call multi-alignment, right? Not non-alignment like the Cold War, and not alignment, meaning I'm with us or with them, but multi-alignment. And I spent, 20 years ago, I wrote my entire first book about this one term, multi-alignment. And it's the notion that smart countries today are always trying to play all sides. So what our media doesn't, it's not their job to tell us this, but the Gulf countries will host China one week, India the next week, Trump the following week, and then probably China again. And don't forget the Europeans. So they're always playing all sides. So the notion that suddenly they are with us and that we have won them back in this tug of war over their hearts is incorrect. They, like everyone else, are always out for themselves, as they should be. They're acting in their own national interest. So that's what I'm getting at here. If you were to break up the important countries in the world into clusters based upon vaguely, and I will put alliance in quotes, there are really no meaningful, truly committed structural alliances, rigid alliances anymore. They're more like just dalliances, right? So the principal regional fora that are strategic in nature would be NATO, or I'm calling it global NATO. In fact, about 20 years ago, what we now call the Quad, right? The United States, India, Australia, and Japan formed over cookies at the Brookings Institution. I'm not kidding, by the way, because I was eating those cookies. We had the ambassadors and ministers from those countries getting together in Washington talking about how we would build a global NATO, and now it's called the Quad. So now it's NATO plus a whole bunch of countries that are Western aligned or American aligned. Then you've got the BRICS zone, and I think Kate at the beginning mentioned BRICS, as an emerging strategic formation. It has grown from just the original 4 or 5 countries to a dozen, and a dozen more waiting to join. And then the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is obviously China-centric, covering Central Asia. But I want you to pay attention to the countries in the middle. These are all the countries that are practicing that multi-alignment. And lo and behold, what do you have? Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates. You have Turkey, which is a member of NATO and likely to join both the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the BRICS, and India as well, which is a country that we thought would align with us against Russia and join in the sanctions, but of course didn't, because it is dependent on importing Russian oil. So more and more and more countries fall in this space. So then that brings us to the Chinese relationship with the Gulf countries. Let's remember, who is Saudi Arabia's largest trading partner, right? Who is the UAE's largest trading partner? No matter how many data centers we build there, no matter how many deals we do with them, China is their number 1 trading partner. India is their number 2 largest trading partners. And if any countries vote with their wallet, as many countries should, they do. So this brings us to the gold vault, because there's 2 things. One is there have been rumors of a petro RMB and petro rupee for a long time, both of which are happening through the back door, just through countries shifting their reserves to trade-weighted baskets, though the GCC economies are still US dollar pegged for price stability. But I do think it is inevitable, given the fact that you have had for 3 decades this maritime Silk Road, this commodity super cycle, that starting this weekend, again, an event that will not make our news, is actually the GCC ASEAN Summit, so GCC countries and Southeast Asian countries, which is another enormous trading axis, right? So there will be a redenomination of commodities trade away from the dollar that favors the RMB. But the problem is that because obviously China doesn't float its currency, it is pre-positioning gold reserves that it has been hoarding into vaults in Saudi Arabia, so that the RMB reserves that they're holding are redeemable to gold in a manner that gives those countries sufficient confidence. So they'll actually wind up with a petro RMB at some point and have this partial convertibility, situational convertibility to gold. Those two, among quite a few other transactions that are underway, like de-dollarization, moving towards CBDCs and so forth, are going to undermine the centrality of the dollar. Plus, now we have our own problem with the 20-year Treasury yield crossing 5%.